The photograph sits on my desk, its edges frayed and yellowed by the passage of time. A sepia-toned window to another era, 1906 to be precise. I run my fingers along its damaged surface, feeling the texture of history beneath my fingertips. The boy in the photograph stares back at me, his expression solemn yet somehow peaceful. His small hands clutch a wooden toy boat, the craftsmanship evident even through the faded image. The coastal scene behind him stretches into a misty horizon, where the sea meets the sky in an indistinguishable blur. I've restored countless photographs in my 20 years as a conservator, but something about this one captivates me. Perhaps it's the boy's eyes. They seem to look not at the camera, but through it, as if perceiving something beyond the moment being captured. My name is Eleanor Blackwood. I specialize in photographic restoration, particularly images from the late Victorian and Edwardian eras. This photograph came to me through unusual circumstances. A small package delivered to my studio with no return address, containing only this photograph and a note that read, "Please restore. What lies beneath matters." Little did I know that this seemingly innocent restoration project would lead me down a path of discovery that would challenge everything I thought I knew about history, perception, and the thin veil between what we choose to see and what we choose to ignore. As I placed the photograph under my specialized light, I noticed something unusual at the bottom edge, a darkened area that most would dismiss as damage or a shadow. But years of experience have taught me to question such assumptions. This isn't just deterioration. There's something there, something that time and perhaps deliberate intervention had attempted to obscure. I begin the painstaking process of digital scanning, capturing every detail of the original photograph before I attempt any physical restoration. The high-resolution scan reveals what my naked eye suspected. There's definitely something in that shadowed area behind the boy. I carefully adjust the contrast, working pixel by pixel around the dark region. Slowly, gradually, something begins to emerge from the darkness. A shape takes form, the unmistakable outline of feet, adult feet, positioned directly behind the boy, as if someone was standing there just out of frame, perhaps even holding the child in place for the photograph. But here's what disturbs me. In the original composition of the photograph, there appears to be no one else. The boy stands alone on what looks like a wooden dock or pier. Where the rest of this person's body should be, there is only the misty coastline. It's as if just the feet were present, disembodied, belonging to no one. A cold sensation crawls up my spine. I've seen plenty of photographic anomalies in my career. Double exposures, light leaks, chemical stains that create strange apparitions. But this is different. These feet are too detailed, too perfectly positioned to be a mere accident of photography. I reach for my phone and call my colleague, Dr. Marcus Reed, a professor of photographic history at the university. "Marcus, I need your eyes on something unusual." "Another ghost in the machine, Eleanor?" He chuckles. Marcus has always been amused by my occasional fascination with the stranger aspects of historical photography. "This is different," I insist. "Can you come by the studio tomorrow?" "For you, I'll make time." "What era are we talking about?" 1906. A coastal scene, a boy with a toy boat. There's a pause on the line. "Interesting timing," Marcus finally says. "I've just been reviewing materials on early 20th century coastal photography for my new book. Bring it by my office instead. I have some references that might help contextualize what you're seeing." That night I can't sleep. The image of those feet, partially obscured yet undeniably present, haunts me. I find myself returning to my computer at 3 in the morning, staring at the enhanced scan, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. I zoom in further on the boy's face, studying his expression with renewed attention. Something in his eyes now seems less peaceful and more alert, afraid even. His grip on the toy boat appears tighter than I initially thought, his knuckles white with tension. Was he aware of the presence behind him? Morning comes, and with it, a new determination to understand what this photograph is showing me. I carefully place the original in a protective sleeve and head to the university to meet Marcus. His office is a shrine to photographic history, walls lined with bookshelves containing volumes on everything from daguerreotypes to modern digital techniques. Photographs from various eras hang in frames, each with a story that Marcus knows by heart. "Let me see this mysterious image then," he says, clearing a space on his cluttered desk. I remove the photograph from its sleeve and place it under his magnifying lamp. Marcus leans in, his expression shifting from academic curiosity to something more serious as he examines the image. "You've done some digital enhancement already?" he asks, without looking up. Yes, just basic contrast adjustment to get a better look at the anomaly. I hand him a printed copy of my enhanced scan, with the feet clearly visible. Marcus stares at the enhanced image for a long moment, then looks back at the original photograph. This is extraordinary, he finally says, his voice quieter than usual. Have you researched the provenance of this photograph? Do you know who the boy is? No, it came to me anonymously. Just the photo and a cryptic note about restoring it to reveal what's beneath. Marcus leans back in his chair, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. Eleanor, are you familiar with the Blackwater Harbor incident of 1906? I shake my head. It was a small coastal town in New England. In April of 1906, 7 children disappeared over the course of 2 weeks, all between the ages of 6 and 10. It caused quite a panic at the time, but was eventually overshadowed in national news by the San Francisco earthquake that same month. A chill runs through me. And you think this boy... I can't be certain, Marcus cautions, but the timing matches, and there's something about the setting that reminds me of descriptions of Blackwater Harbor. The most peculiar aspect of the case was that several of the children were last seen playing near the water, often with toy boats, a popular pastime for children in coastal communities back then. Were the children ever found? I ask, already dreading the answer. No, the case was never solved. Marcus puts his glasses back on and returns to studying the photograph. What's particularly interesting is that there were reports, dismissed as hysteria at the time, of children claiming to see a person without a body near the harbor in the days leading up to the disappearances. My skin prickles with goosebumps. A person without a body. The description from one girl, as quoted in a local newspaper, was of feet that walked by themselves, following the children as they played. Of course, authorities attributed this to childish imagination, amplified by the fear gripping the town. I look back at the photograph, at the innocent face of the boy holding his toy boat, and the partial figure behind him that shouldn't exist. I need to know more about Blackwater Harbor, I say decisively. I thought you might say that. Marcus reaches for a book on his shelf, a thick volume entitled Forgotten American Tragedies, 1900-1910. This has a chapter on the incident. It's not comprehensive, but it's a start. As Marcus searches for the relevant section, I notice a small detail in the enhanced photograph that I hadn't spotted before. The toy boat in the boy's hands has a name painted on its hull. I squint, trying to make out the tiny letters. Marcus, do you have a stronger magnifier? He passes me a more powerful loupe, and I focus it on the toy boat. The name comes into clarity. Leviathan. The boy's boat, I say. It's named Leviathan. Marcus looks up sharply from his book. That's significant. Why? According to this account, one of the missing children, a boy named Thomas Caldwell, was known for carrying a toy boat he had named after the biblical sea monster, Leviathan. His grandfather had told him stories of sea creatures, and the boy had become fascinated with the legend. I stare at the photograph with growing unease. So this could be Thomas Caldwell, shortly before his disappearance. Possibly, but that still doesn't explain the feet behind him or how this photograph came into your possession over a century later. I take a deep breath, trying to process this information. I need to go to Blackwater Harbor, I decide. If it still exists, I need to see where this happened. Marcus gives me a concerned look. Eleanor, that's quite a leap from restoration work. What are you hoping to find in a place that's changed over the span of 117 years? Context, understanding. I don't know, Marcus, but this doesn't feel like just another restoration project anymore. Someone sent me this photograph for a reason. They knew what would be revealed. If you're determined to go, you should know the town isn't called Blackwater Harbor anymore. After the disappearances and the subsequent economic decline, it was eventually incorporated into the larger coastal city of North Haven. The old harbor area still exists, though it's largely abandoned now, from what I understand. I carefully return the photograph to its protective sleeve. Can I borrow that book? Marcus hesitates, then nods. Take it. But Eleanor, approach this with caution. Historical research is one thing, but if you're thinking of turning detective over a century-old cold case, I just want to understand the photograph, I assure him, though I'm not entirely convinced of this myself. Professional curiosity, that's all. Marcus doesn't look persuaded, but he doesn't try to stop me either. As I'm about to leave, he calls after me. Eleanor, one more thing. The Blackwater Harbor case had another unusual element that always struck me as odd. After the disappearances, when investigators were interviewing the local children, several mentioned a man they called the boat maker, someone who would appear at the harbor occasionally, offering to make or repair toy boats for the children. Was this person ever identified? No. Some parents dismissed it as an imaginary figure. Others thought it might have been a drifter passing through town. No one reported actually seeing this person themselves. Only the children spoke of him. The drive to North Haven takes me along winding coastal roads that become increasingly remote and less maintained. The New England landscape is beautiful in its austere way. Rocky shores and resilient pines that have withstood centuries of Atlantic storms. By the time I reach the outskirts of North Haven, the afternoon sun is beginning to descend toward the horizon. North Haven itself is a study in contrast, a downtown area that shows signs of attempted revitalization, alongside neighborhoods of evident decline. I stop at a small coffee shop to ask directions to the old Blackwater Harbor section and receive a mixture of curiosity and wariness from the barista, a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair. "Tourist season's over," she remarks as she hands me my coffee. "Not much to see in the old harbor anyway. Most of the buildings are condemned." "I'm doing research on historical photography," I explain, deciding a partial truth is better than none. I'm interested in how the area has changed since the early 1900s. Something shifts in her expression, a guardedness that wasn't there before. Blackwater's got a complicated history. Not all of it makes the official town website, if you know what I mean. "I've read about the disappearances in 1906, I say carefully. The barista glances around the empty coffee shop before leaning in slightly. "My grandmother grew up here. She was just a little girl when it happened, but she remembered it all her life. Said it changed the town forever. Not just the tragedy itself, but how people treated each other afterward. Suspicion does ugly things to a community." "Did she ever mention someone called the boatmaker?" The woman's hand pauses in the act of wiping the counter. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. How do you know about that?" "It was mentioned in some historical accounts," I say, not wanting to reveal too much about the photograph yet. She studies me for a moment, then seems to make a decision. "If you're really interested in Blackwater's history, you should talk to Morris Keene at the Historical Society. He's documented pretty much everything about this town, including the stories most folks would rather forget." She writes an address on a napkin and slides it across to me. "Thank you," I say sincerely. "And the directions to the old harbor? Follow Main Street to the end, turn right on Harbor Road. Can't miss it, but mind the no trespassing signs. Those old piers aren't safe anymore." The Historical Society occupies a Victorian house set back from the main road. It's paint peeling, but its architectural details still impressive. A small handwritten sign in the window indicates limited opening hours, but luck is with me. Today is one of the days it's open. Inside, the house has been converted into exhibition spaces, with glass cases displaying artifacts and photographs chronicling the town's history. An elderly man with a trim white beard looks up from a desk cluttered with papers. "Can I help you?" he asks, his voice surprisingly robust for his apparent age. "I'm looking for Morris Keene. The woman at the coffee shop in town suggested I speak with him about Blackwater Harbor's history." "You've found him," he says, standing to offer his hand. "Though most people are more interested in our whaling history or the colonial settlements. What's your particular interest in Blackwater?" I decide to be direct, reaching into my bag to produce the enhanced scan of the photograph. I keep the original safely tucked away for now. I'm a photographic conservator. This image was sent to me for restoration. It appears to show a boy at what might be Blackwater Harbor in 1906, possibly one of the children who disappeared that year. Morris takes the scan with careful hands, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he studies it. Without a word, he walks to a door at the back of the room and gestures for me to follow. "We should talk in my office," he says. His office is more of a library, with bookshelves lining every wall and stacks of documents creating a labyrinth on the floor. He clears a space on an old leather couch and invites me to sit, taking a worn armchair opposite me. "Where did you get this?" he asks without preamble. "It was sent to me anonymously. I specialize in restoring photographs from this era." "And the feet behind the boy? They were revealed through your restoration process?" "Yes. They weren't clearly visible in the original, at least not to the naked eye." Morris nods slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "May I see the original photograph?" I hesitate, then carefully remove it from its protective sleeve. Morris handles it with the reverence of someone accustomed to dealing with historical artifacts. "This is Thomas Caldwell," he confirms after a moment. "I recognize him from the family photographs we have in our archives. This was taken very shortly before he disappeared, perhaps even the same day. The boat is named Leviathan," I point out. "Yes, He was known for that. His grandfather was a former whaler who filled the boy's head with sea legends. Morris looks up from the photograph to study my face. "What's your interest in this, Ms. Blackwood? Eleanor Blackwood?" And honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Professional curiosity, initially. But now, I feel like there's something important here. Something unresolved. Morris seems to consider this, then rises and goes to one of the bookshelves. He retrieves an old leather-bound album and returns to his seat. "The Blackwater disappearances were never officially solved," he begins, opening the album to reveal newspaper clippings, carefully preserved behind protective sheets. 7 children vanished over 14 days in April 1906. No bodies were ever found. No conclusive evidence pointing to any suspect was ever uncovered. He turns the pages slowly, showing me headlines from the time. "Third child missing from harbor." "Town in panic as disappearances continue." "San Francisco devastation overshadows New England mystery." The official investigation focused on a few theories, Morris continues. A drifter passing through town. A resident with a hidden capacity for evil. Even the possibility that the children had somehow drowned in a group, though no bodies washing ashore made that seem unlikely. "And what do you think happened?" I ask. Morris closes the album carefully. "I think the truth was staring them in the face, but it was too bizarre, too frightening to acknowledge. So they looked for explanations that fit their understanding of the world." "The feet in the photograph," I say quietly, "and the children's stories about the boatmaker and the person without a body." Morris leans forward. "Ms. Blackwood, in my 40 years of studying this town's history, I've come across multiple accounts, spanning generations, of strange sightings near the old harbor, most frequently reported by children, but occasionally by adults as well. Partial figures, glimpses of something that shouldn't exist. Most people dismiss these as imagination or the psychological effect of knowing about the town's tragic history. But you don't? I reserve judgment. What I do know is that the old harbor has always been different. The indigenous peoples who lived here before European settlement had legends about it being a place where the boundary between worlds was thin. I think about the photograph, about the boy's expression that now seems fearful rather than solemn. I'd like to see the harbor. Morris glances out the window, where the day is fading toward evening. "Not tonight," he says firmly. "The old structures are dangerous enough in daylight. I'll take you tomorrow morning if you're staying in town." I hadn't planned that far ahead, I admit. "There's a bed and breakfast 2 blocks from here, Harborview Inn, though it hasn't actually had a view of the harbor for decades. Tell Sarah I sent you. She'll have a room available this time of year." As I prepare to leave, Morris holds onto the photograph for one last look. "You know what's most disturbing about this?" he says. "Thomas is looking directly at whoever took this photograph, but all the accounts suggest he was alone when he disappeared. His mother had watched him walk toward the harbor with his boat, but no one admitted to seeing him actually at the waterfront." "So, who took the photograph?" I ask. "Exactly." Morris carefully returns it to me. "And why did they send it to you specifically over a century later?" The Harborview Inn is a charming colonial-style house with a wraparound porch and gables that have witnessed centuries of coastal history. The proprietor, Sarah, is a woman in her 60s with a friendly but no-nonsense demeanor. As promised, she has a room available and seems unsurprised when I mention Morris sent me. "Research project?" she asks as she leads me up a creaking staircase to the 2nd floor. "Something like that. I'm a photographic conservator looking into some historical images from the area." "Morris has been trying to document every aspect of local history for decades," she remarks. "Town council thinks he's wasting resources on ancient history, but some of us understand the importance of remembering." My room is cozy and decidedly old-fashioned, with floral wallpaper and a 4-poster bed that looks original to the house. The window overlooks a garden that must be lovely in spring, though it's now settled into autumn dormancy. "Breakfast is from 7 to 9, Sarah informs me. "You're my only guest tonight, so I won't be offended if you're not an early riser." After she leaves, I set up my laptop on the small writing desk and connect to the surprisingly robust Wi-Fi. I spend the evening researching everything I can find about Blackwater Harbor, the disappearances, and the subsequent history of the town. There isn't much beyond what Marcus and Morris have already told me, though I do find digitized versions of some of the newspaper articles Morris showed me in his album. One detail catches my attention. In the days after the disappearances, several families reported that their missing children had recently acquired new toy boats or had their old ones repaired, despite the parents having no knowledge of who might have done this. I also search for any information on similar cases in other coastal towns. wondering if the pattern might have repeated elsewhere. There are, of course, countless cases of missing children throughout history, but none with the specific elements that make the Blackwater Harbor incident so distinctive. As the night deepens, I find myself returning again and again to the enhanced scan of the photograph. The boy, Thomas, stares out from 1906, his expression a mixture of fear and resignation. And behind him those feet, so mundane in their appearance yet so impossible in their context. Who took this photograph? And who sent it to me? I sleep fitfully, my dreams filled with images of wooden docks and dark water. In one particularly vivid sequence, I'm standing on a pier, watching a small boy play with a toy boat. I call out to warn him, though of what I'm not certain, but no sound comes from my mouth. When the boy finally turns to look at me, his face is featureless and smooth, like uncarved wood. I wake with a start at 6:30 a.m., the gray light of dawn filtering through the curtains. Despite the less than restful night, I feel alert, driven by the need to see the harbor for myself. Sarah is already in the kitchen when I come downstairs, the smell of coffee and baking filling the air. "You're up early," she notes, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter to me. "Morris called. He said to tell you he'll meet you here at 8 to show you the harbor." "Thank you." I cradle the warm mug between my hands, watching as Sarah moves efficiently around her kitchen, pulling muffins from the oven. "Have you lived in North Haven your whole life?" "Born and raised," she confirms. "My family goes back 6 generations in this town, so they would have been here during the Blackwater Harbor incident." Sarah pauses in her work, giving me a measured look. "So that's what you're researching?" It's not a question, but I nod anyway. "My great-grandmother lost her best friend in those disappearances," Sarah says after a moment. "A girl named Lucy Fleming. They were both 8 years old. According to family stories, my great-grandmother was supposed to meet Lucy at the harbor that day, but she fell ill that morning and couldn't go." "I'm sorry," I say, unsure what else to offer. "It's ancient history now," Sarah replies, though her tone suggests the wound still lingers in the town's collective memory. "But it shaped how generations of children in this town were raised. No playing near the harbor alone, no talking to strangers. The usual warnings parents give, but with a particular intensity here. Were there ever any other disappearances after 1906? Sarah places a plate with a blueberry muffin in front of me. "Not in the same way. Not children taken without a trace. But the harbor has claimed lives over the years. Accidents, suicides, a few suspected murders that were never solved. More than seems natural for a place this size." Before I can ask more questions, there's a knock at the door. Morris has arrived, dressed for outdoor exploration in sturdy boots and a weathered jacket. "Ready to see what's left of Blackwater Harbor?" he asks when Sarah shows him in. I grab my coat and camera, tucking the photograph safely into an inner pocket. The morning is chilly, with a mist rolling in from the sea that shrouds the town in a spectral haze. It feels fitting for our expedition. Morris drives us in his aging Volvo, navigating the streets of North Haven with the confidence of someone who has known them all his life. As we move away from the town center, the buildings become more dilapidated, many boarded up or simply abandoned to the elements. The economic decline began even before the disappearances, Morris explains as we drive. The fishing industry was already struggling, and the shipping trade had moved to larger ports. But after 1906, it accelerated. Families moved away. Tourism dried up. Who wants to vacation in a town known for vanishing children? We park at the end of a neglected road where asphalt gives way to gravel and then to overgrown paths. A chain-link fence bears multiple no trespassing and danger signs, but Morris leads me to a section where the fence has been cut and bent back. "Local teenagers," he explains with a shrug. "They come here on dares, especially around Halloween. The harbor has quite the reputation for being haunted." Beyond the fence, we follow a path through tall grass and scrubby trees until the land suddenly opens up to reveal the harbor. What remains of it anyway. Decaying wooden piers stretch out into water that's gray and choppy under the misty sky. The structures that once would have lined the waterfront, warehouses, shops, fishermen's sheds, are now mostly just foundations or partial walls reclaimed by vegetation. The whole scene has a melancholy beauty to it, the kind that speaks of human ambition abandoned to nature's patient reclamation. "It's been like this since the 1970s, Morris says, his voice quieter now that we're standing in the place itself. "The last commercial operation here closed in 1969. There have been proposals over the years to redevelop it, marinas, condominiums, tourist attractions, but somehow they always fall through. Financing disappears. Accidents happen during preliminary work. Interested parties suddenly change their minds. I take out my camera and begin photographing the scene, trying to imagine how it would have looked in 1906, bustling with activity, children playing along the waterfront, while fishermen mended nets and merchants conducted business. Where exactly did the children disappear from? I ask. Morris points to one of the longer piers that extends further into the water than the others. Most of them were last seen near that structure there, or what's left of it. It was the main commercial pier back then. Ships would dock there to unload cargo and take on local goods for transport. I walk carefully toward the indicated pier, mindful of the uneven ground and hidden hazards. Morris follows at a slightly slower pace. "Be careful," he warns. "Those boards haven't been maintained in decades. They could give way at any moment." The closer we get to the water, the stronger the sense of unease I feel. I tell myself it's just the power of suggestion, knowing the history of this place and its association with tragedy. But there's something more. Something in the quality of the air itself. It feels heavier here, more resistant to movement, as if the boundary between past and present is somehow more permeable. At the entrance to the pier, I stop and remove the photograph from my pocket. I hold it up, trying to align it with the current view, to see if I can determine exactly where Thomas Caldwell was standing when the image was captured. "The shoreline has changed over the years," Morris says, looking over my shoulder at the photograph. "Erosion, storms, the occasional attempt at development. But that post there, the one with the metal ring attached, that's visible in your photograph. It would have been used for mooring smaller boats." He's right. In the background of the photograph, partially obscured by mist, is the same distinctive post that still stands, weather-beaten but recognizable, at the beginning of the pier. So Thomas was standing right about here, I say, positioning myself where I estimate the boy would have been. A sudden chill runs through me that has nothing to do with the morning air. Standing in this spot, I can almost feel the weight of the past pressing down, as if time itself has thinned to a transparent membrane. "Do you feel that?" I ask Morris. He nods gravely. "The old harbor has always had a certain atmosphere. Most people attribute it to the psychological effect of knowing what happened here, but you think it's something more." "I think there are aspects of reality that we don't fully understand," he says carefully. "Places where conventional explanations don't quite cover what people experience." I take a few steps onto the pier itself, testing each board before putting my full weight on it. The wood creaks ominously, but holds. About 20 feet out, I stop and turn back to face the shore, trying to see the scene from the photographer's perspective. That's when I notice something odd about the angle. Given where Thomas was standing in the photograph, and assuming the photographer was on land, the boy should have been facing more to the side, showing a partial profile to the camera. But in the image, he's looking directly forward. "Morris," I call back, "the perspective is wrong. Whoever took this photograph wasn't standing on the shore." Morris makes his way carefully out to join me. "What do you mean?" "Based on the angle and the background elements we can identify, the photographer would have had to be standing." I turn slowly, orienting myself according to the details in the image. Out there, over the water, we both look out at the empty harbor, where there is now only open water, where a person would have needed to stand to capture that specific angle. "There could have been another structure," Morris suggests, but his voice lacks conviction. "A smaller pier or platform that's gone now." "Maybe," I concede, though the unease in my stomach suggests another explanation, one that aligns with the impossible feat behind Thomas in the image. As we stand there contemplating this puzzle, I become aware of a sound, faint at first, then gradually more distinct. A rhythmic creaking, like footsteps on old wood, coming from further out on the pier. "Do you hear that?" I whisper to Morris. His face has gone pale. "We should go back," he says tensely. "Now." But I'm transfixed by the sound, by the impossibility of it. There's no one visible on the pier ahead of us, yet the creaking continues, growing louder, as if someone, or something, is walking toward us. I raise my camera instinctively, looking through the viewfinder as if it might reveal what my eyes cannot see. For an instant, so brief I might have imagined it, I think I glimpse something in the digital display. A distortion in the air, a ripple like heat waves rising from hot pavement, roughly in the shape of a person. "Eleanor!" Morris's voice is urgent now, his hand gripping my arm. "We need to leave. Now!" The rational part of my mind agrees with him completely, but some deeper instinct keeps me rooted to the spot. I take one photo, then another, my finger pressing the shutter button almost independently of my conscious will. The creaking stops abruptly. The air seems to still, the mist hanging motionless around us. Even the waves below the pier appear to pause in their constant motion. And then, carried on a breeze that doesn't seem to touch anything else, comes a voice. Soft, almost childlike, yet with an underlying quality that raises the hair on the back of my neck. Have you brought it back? The Leviathan? Morris's grip on my arm tightens painfully. His face is a mask of terror, his eyes fixed on a point just ahead of us on the pier. Morris, I whisper, afraid to look away from him, afraid of what I might see if I do. Run, he says, his voice barely audible. Run now. He pulls me backward, and this time I don't resist. We move as quickly as we dare on the unstable boards, not looking back until we reach solid ground. Only then do I turn to face the pier again. There's nothing visible there, just weathered wood extending into misty water. But the atmosphere has changed, charged with an expectant energy, as if something is waiting, watching. What did you see? I ask Morris once we're safely back at his car, our breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. He shakes his head, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbles with his keys. Not here, back at the Historical Society. The drive back to town passes in tense silence. My mind races with questions, with attempts to rationalize what just happened, what we both experienced. The logical explanations, an auditory illusion caused by wind through the old structure, a shared psychological response to a place with dark associations, seem flimsy against the visceral reality of what we felt. By the time we reach the Historical Society, Morris has regained some of his composure, though he still moves with the careful deliberation of someone who has received a profound shock. Inside his office, he goes straight to a cabinet and removes a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. It's not yet 10 in the morning, but I accept the offered drink without comment, grateful for its steadying warmth. I've been studying the history of Blackwater Harbor for 40 years, Morris says after taking a long sip from his glass. I've interviewed dozens of people who claim to have had unusual experiences there. I've read every account, every report, every newspaper article, but until today I'd never experienced it myself. What did you see on the pier? I ask again. Morris stares into his glass for a long moment. Nothing solid. Nothing I could definitively say was there, but there was a distortion, a suggestion of a figure, and when that voice spoke, he shudders visibly. It matched descriptions I've read in accounts from 1906. Children who reported interactions with the boatmaker described a voice that sounded like a child pretending to be a grown-up. I take out my camera and begin reviewing the photos I took at the harbor. Most show exactly what I saw with my naked eye: the decaying pier, the misty water, the overgrown shoreline. But when I reach the last 2 images, the ones I took when we heard the creaking footsteps, I inhale sharply. Morris, look at this. In the first image, there's a subtle distortion in the air above the pier, a warping of the visual field that could be dismissed as a lens flare or digital artifact. But in the second image, taken moments later, the distortion has taken on a more distinct form. Still transparent, still not fully materialized, but undeniably anthropomorphic, a suggestion of shoulders, a head, and most distinctly, feet that seem more solid than the rest of the apparition. Morris stares at the digital display with wide eyes. May I? He asks, reaching for the camera. He zooms in on the distorted area, his expression a mixture of fear and academic fascination. This is unprecedented documentation. But of what exactly? I ask, voicing the question that hangs between us. A ghost? Some kind of time anomaly? A shared hallucination that somehow registered on a digital sensor? I don't know, Morris admits, returning the camera to me. But I do know that whatever happened in Blackwater Harbor in 1906 isn't finished, and somehow you've become connected to it. Through the photograph, I murmur, taking it out once more to study Thomas Caldwell's face and the partially visible feet behind him. Someone wanted me to find this, to restore it, to see what was hidden. The question is, why now? After more than a century? I think about the voice we heard on the pier, its question about the Leviathan. I think it's looking for something. The boat, specifically. Thomas's toy boat named after the sea monster. Morris nods slowly. In the reports from 1906, each missing child had recently acquired a new toy boat or had an existing one repaired. The boats were described as unusually well-crafted. By the boatmaker, I say, the pieces starting to align in my mind. the entity that the children reported seeing. Yes, though, as I mentioned, adults dismissed these accounts at the time. What if, I begin, formulating the theory as I speak, what if this entity, whatever it is, used the boats as some kind of connection to the children? A way to lure them or to establish some kind of bond? Morris doesn't immediately reject this seemingly fantastic idea. There are legends in various maritime cultures about spirits or beings that can only interact with our world through specific objects or under specific conditions, objects that serve as anchors or conduits. And the photograph was taken by this entity, I continue. Not by a person standing on another structure, but by the thing itself, somehow able to operate a camera despite its apparently insubstantial nature, which would explain the perspective issue you noticed. Morris agrees. And perhaps why Thomas looked so afraid in the image. He was facing the entity directly. I feel a chill run down my spine as another realization hits me. Morris, what if it's not just looking for any boat named Leviathan? What if it's looking for that specific boat? Thomas Caldwell's boat, after all this time. Where would such an object even be now? I don't know, but I stop mid-sentence as a memory surfaces. The note that came with the photograph. It said, "Please restore. What lies beneath matters." What if that wasn't just referring to revealing the feet in the image? What if there's something else hidden? Something physically concealed within the photograph itself? It's a common enough practice in conservation work. Photographs were sometimes used to hide small items, especially during wartime or periods of unrest. A thin object placed between the photographic paper and its backing could remain concealed for decades. With careful fingers, I examined the edges of the old photograph, looking for any sign of tampering or unusual thickness. The back has a paper backing that appears original to the period, but one corner seems slightly separated from the photographic paper itself. "Do you have any conservation tools here?" I ask Morris. "Tweezers, magnifiers, that sort of thing?" He produces a basic magnifying glass and a pair of fine-tipped tweezers from a desk drawer. "I use these for examining artifacts. Will they work?" "They'll do," I say, setting the photograph on a clean surface and positioning the magnifying glass to get a better view of the separated corner. With the tweezers, I gently probe the small gap between the photographic paper and its backing. There's definitely something there, a thin, flat object inserted between the layers. With painstaking care, I work to extract it without damaging the photograph. Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, a small slip of paper emerges. It's yellowed with age, but has been protected from light and air by its enclosure within the photograph. Once I have a sufficient edge exposed, I grasp it with my fingers and pull it free. It's a small rectangle of paper, approximately 2 inches by 1 inch. On it, written in faded but legible ink, is a message. "The Leviathan rests where the numbers meet the sea. Return it to still the tide of time." Below this cryptic message is what appears to be a set of coordinates, along with a small, simple drawing that resembles a survey marker or reference point. Morris and I stare at the paper in silence for a long moment. "Coordinates," he finally says. "Latitude and longitude, presumably pointing to a location where the toy boat was hidden or placed. But by whom? I wonder aloud. Who would have known to hide the boat? Who would have understood what was happening enough to take action?" Morris's expression becomes thoughtful. "There was one person who claimed to have witnessed one of the disappearances, though his account was largely dismissed. A lighthouse keeper named Elias Winters. According to the newspaper reports, he claimed to have seen one of the missing girls walk into the mist with a figure that wasn't entirely there. The police attributed his statement to excessive drinking or attention-seeking behavior. A lighthouse keeper would understand coordinates," I point out, "and would have a perspective on the harbor that others might lack." "Winters died in 1931, Morris says, "but his journals and personal effects were donated to our collection by a distant relative about 15 years ago. I've never gone through them systematically. It's been on my to-do list for years." "I think it just moved to the top of that list," I say. Morris leads me to a storage room where dozens of boxes are stacked on metal shelving, each labeled with a name and date range. It takes us several minutes to locate the one labeled Winters, Elias, Personal Effects, 1890-1931. The box contains a variety of items: a brass telescope, a pocket watch, several notebooks bound in leather, loose papers, and photographs. Morris and I begin carefully examining each item, looking for any reference to the Blackwater Harbor disappearances or anything that might connect to the coordinates we found. The journals proved to be the most immediately valuable. Written in a neat, disciplined hand, they chronicle Winters' daily observations as lighthouse keeper. interspersed with personal reflections and occasional drawings of ships, weather patterns, and coastal features. We locate the entries from April 1906, the period when the children disappeared. The first mention comes on April 3rd. Observed unusual mist formation in harbor today. Unlike typical sea fog, remained stationary despite onshore breeze. Reported to harbor master, who showed little concern. On April 7th, the first disappearance is noted. Town in uproar over missing Fleming girl, last seen near North Pier with her boat. Search parties organized but found nothing. Harbor mist present again today, though no one else seems to remark upon its unusual qualities. The entries continue, documenting each disappearance with increasing alarm and frustration at not being believed. April 10th, second child missing. Told constable about the mist and the figure I glimpsed within it 3 days ago. He suggested I ease up on the rum. I have been abstinent for 7 years. April 13th, Caldwell boy disappeared today. I was on watch and saw it happen through my glass. The boy was not alone, as they claim. There was a figure with him, transparent like the mist itself, but taking human form. The boy looked up at it, and then both walked to the end of the pier and vanished. Reported what I saw immediately, but was met with disbelief and accusations of adding to public hysteria. April 14th contains a particularly relevant entry. Found something on the shore this morning during my walk. The Caldwell boys' toy boat, washed up among the rocks. It bears the name Leviathan on its hull. Did not report this find to authorities who have proven themselves unwilling to consider explanations beyond human criminality. The boat gives me an uneasy feeling. There are markings on its underside that resemble no shipwright's stamp I have ever seen. And then on April 17th, after the 7th and final disappearance, I understand now what must be done. The entity requires the boats it has crafted to maintain its presence in our world. Each child received a boat, willingly accepted its gift, creating a bond that allowed it to take them. The Caldwell boys' boat, still in my possession, may be the key to ending this. I will hide it where it cannot be found, where the marker stands at the coordinates I have calculated. If my theory is correct, the entity will weaken without all 7 vessels. It may not end its existence, but it may force it into dormancy until the patterns align again. The final entry related to the incident, dated April 30th, reads, Harbor mist has not returned. No further disappearances. Town beginning to calm, though 7 families will never recover from their loss. I have sealed the boat in a container marked with warnings and placed it at the designated location. Have also prepared a photographic record with hidden instructions, should the need arise for future intervention. May God forgive me for not understanding sooner what was happening. Morris and I look at each other, the implications of what we've read sinking in. Winters believed the entity gave specially crafted boats to children as a way to create a connection with them. I summarize. He found Thomas Caldwell's boat after the boy disappeared and hid it, thinking that depriving the entity of all 7 boats would weaken it. And apparently he was right, Morris adds. The disappearances stopped. But now, more than a century later, something has changed, I say. The entity has returned or reawakened and is seeking the missing boat. And someone, we don't know who, sent you the photograph Winters prepared, with its hidden message about where to find the boat. I look again at the coordinates written on the small slip of paper. Do you know where this location would be? Morris studies the numbers, then moves to a large map of the coastline, mounted on one wall of the storage room. It would be somewhere along this stretch of shore, he says, indicating an area about 3 miles north of the harbor. There's nothing there now except rocks and a small beach accessible only at low tide. No development has ever taken place in that area due to the difficult terrain. The message mentions where the numbers meet the sea, I note, and there's this drawing of what looks like a survey marker. There was a coastal survey conducted in the late 1800s, Morris says, his academic knowledge surfacing through the tension of our discovery. They placed markers along the shore at regular intervals. Some of them still exist, though many have been lost to erosion or development. I check my watch. What time is low tide today? Morris thinks for a moment. Around 3 p.m. if I recall the local charts correctly. Then we have a few hours to prepare, I say, surprising myself with my determination to see this through. I want to find that boat. Eleanor, Morris says cautiously, if what we're theorizing is correct, we're dealing with something dangerous. Something that took 7 children and has existed in some form for over a century. Is retrieving this boat really wise? I don't know, I admit. but I do know that I was sent that photograph for a reason. Someone wants me to find the boat. And after what we experienced at the pier this morning, I don't think ignoring this is an option. The entity is active again, seeking what it lost. What happens if it decides to take more children when it can't find its missing creation? Morris doesn't have an answer to that. After a moment of internal struggle visible on his face, he sighs. I'll help you locate the marker, but we should be prepared for whatever might happen when we find the boat, if it's even still there after all this time. We spend the next few hours gathering what supplies we can for our expedition: flashlights, a small shovel, gloves, my camera, and bottles of water. Morris also brings a copy of Elias Winter's journal entries, in case they contain details we've overlooked. By 2 p.m., we're in Morris's car again, driving north along the coastal road. The day has remained misty, the sun a pale disk barely visible through the haze. The landscape becomes increasingly rugged as we move away from town, with the road climbing higher above the shoreline. Morris eventually pulls over at a small turnout near a hiking trail marker. This is as close as we can get by car, he explains. From here, we'll have to hike down to the shore. The trail is steep and slippery in places, winding through scrubby pines and over rocky outcroppings. It takes us nearly 30 minutes to reach the narrow strip of beach below, which is gradually being exposed as the tide recedes. The coordinates should place the marker somewhere along this stretch, Morris says, consulting a printout of the map he marked before we left. About 200 yards north of our position, we begin walking along the wet sand, scanning the rocks and higher ground for anything resembling the survey marker in the drawing. The sound of waves and the cry of gulls are our only companions as we search, the mist creating an intimate bubble around us that limits visibility to about 50 yards in any direction. There, Morris suddenly says, pointing to a rock formation ahead. That looks like it could be it. Embedded in a large boulder just above the high tide line is a metal disc, green with verdigris, but still recognizable as a survey marker. The numbers stamped into its surface are barely legible after more than a century of exposure to salt air and weather, but they match the pattern indicated in Winter's drawing. Where the numbers meet the sea, I murmur, looking around the immediate area. So the boat should be hidden somewhere near this marker. We begin searching methodically, checking crevices in the rocks, digging in likely spots where something might have been buried. The tide continues to recede, revealing more of the beach and the underwater features close to shore. After 20 minutes of increasingly desperate searching, Morris sits down on a rock, his breath coming heavily from the exertion. Maybe it's gone, he suggests, washed away by a storm or found by someone else over the decades. I'm about to reluctantly agree when something catches my eye, a reflection from the water about 10 feet offshore, now exposed as the tide withdraws. Wait, I say, pointing. What's that? Morris follows my gaze. Something metal, he confirms, standing to get a better look. I wade into the shallow water, my shoes and lower pants immediately soaked by the cold Atlantic. The object is partially embedded in sand, but is clearly artificial. A small metal box, approximately the size that might hold a child's toy boat. With careful hands, I work it free from the sand and carry it back to shore. The box is made of some corrosion-resistant metal, perhaps brass with a protective coating, and has weathered its long immersion remarkably well. A tight seal appears to have kept the contents dry, and there are symbols etched into the lid that match some of the unusual markings Winters described seeing on the underside of the boat. Should we open it? Morris asks, his voice hushed with apprehension. I think that's why we're here, I reply, though my own hands tremble slightly as I examine the box for a way to open it. There's a simple latch mechanism that, despite decades underwater, yields to gentle pressure. I take a deep breath and lift the lid. Inside, nestled in what appears to be oilcloth, is a small wooden boat, exquisitely carved and perfectly preserved. The name Leviathan is painted in delicate script along its hull, the letters still crisp and clear after all this time. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, with details that would challenge a master woodworker even with modern tools. Thomas Caldwell's boat, Morris breathes, leaning in for a closer look but not touching it, exactly as Winters described. I carefully lift the boat from its protective wrapping, marveling at how light it feels, as if carved from some wood unknown to modern forestry. The underside bears the strange markings Winters mentioned, symbols that resemble no alphabet I recognize, but nonetheless give the impression of language, of meaning. What do we do now? Morris asks. Winters believed hiding the boat weakened the entity. If we found it, then the entity might sense its presence again. I finish for him. Might be drawn to it. As if in confirmation of this fear, the mist around us begins to thicken, coalescing in a way that seems deliberate rather than natural. The temperature drops noticeably, my breath suddenly visible in front of me. We need to go, Morris says urgently. Now. I carefully return the boat to its box, snapping the lid shut. We can't leave it here, I insist. If what we believe is true, the entity will reclaim it as soon as we're gone. Then bring it, Morris agrees, already moving toward the trail that will take us back to the car. But hurry. We begin climbing the steep path away from the beach, the metal box clutched tightly in my hands. The mist follows, swirling around our ankles like something alive, something hungry. The air grows heavier with each step, as if we're moving through water rather than atmosphere. And then we hear it, that same voice from the pier, childlike yet ancient, now echoing from everywhere around us. The Leviathan returns. The circle nears completion. Morris stumbles on the path ahead of me, his face pale with fear when he turns back. It's here, he says unnecessarily. It knows we have the boat. Keep moving, I urge him, fighting my own terror. We need to get back to town, to somewhere safe. We continue our ascent, but the path seems longer now. The twists and turns unfamiliar despite having come this way less than an hour before. The mist thickens further, reducing visibility to mere feet, forcing us to slow our pace to avoid hazardous missteps. Eleanor, Morris calls from a few paces ahead, his voice tight with alarm. I don't recognize this section of trail. I think we've somehow gotten turned around. I stop to catch my breath, looking back the way we came. The path behind us vanishes into white mist, offering no clues as to our location or direction. The disorientation is profound, a dizzying sensation of being nowhere and everywhere at once. The boat, the voice whispers again, closer now. My creation, my connection. A figure begins to form in the mist ahead. First, just those feet, solid and ordinary looking. Then gradually the suggestion of legs, a torso, arms, and finally a head. The entire apparition remains transparent, a distortion in the air rather than a solid presence, but its humanoid shape is unmistakable. Morris backs up until he's standing beside me, both of us frozen in place as the entity approaches. It moves with a peculiar gait, as if it hasn't quite mastered the mechanics of walking on land. Who are you? I force myself to ask, my voice sounding thin and frail in the mist-muffled air. What do you want? The figure stops about 10 feet from us. This close, I can see that its features are indistinct, like a sculpture left deliberately unfinished, with only the suggestion of eyes, nose, and mouth. I am the boat maker, it replies, the words seeming to form directly in my mind rather than traveling through the air. I craft vessels for crossing. Crossing what? Morris asks, his academic curiosity somehow asserting itself through his fear. The boundaries, the entity responds. Between worlds, between states of being, between times. I exist in the in-between, the liminal spaces where transition is possible. And the children? I demand, anger suddenly cutting through my fear. The 7 children who disappeared in 1906? What did you do to them? The featureless face seems to tilt, as if considering my question. They accepted my gifts. They formed the bond. They crossed with me, as was the agreement. They were children, Morris says harshly. They couldn't have understood what they were agreeing to. Innocence sees more clearly than experience, the entity responds. They recognized me for what I am. Adults see only what they expect to see. I grip the metal box containing the boat more tightly. And now? What do you want now? Completion, the entity says simply. The 7th boat must return to my keeping. The cycle must continue. What cycle? I ask. Time moves differently across boundaries, the entity explains, its form fluctuating like a reflection in disturbed water. What you perceive as more than a century has been but a moment in my existence. The alignment approaches again. New crossings become possible. A horrible understanding dawns on me. You're planning to take more children. Those who accept my gifts, yes. Those who form the bond willingly. We won't let that happen, I declare, with more conviction than I truly feel. We know what you are now. We can warn people. The entity's form ripples in what might be amusement. Humans have short memories. Warnings become legends. Legends become stories. Stories lose their power to protect. It extends a misty hand toward the box in my grasp. The boat restorer. It belongs with its maker. I take a step backward, though some invisible force seems to pull at the box. making it increasingly difficult to hold on to. If I give you this, what happens to the children you took? Do they return? They crossed, the entity says. They exist now in my realm, in a state your mind cannot comprehend. Time has no meaning there as it does here. They remain as they were when they accepted my gift. Trapped for eternity as children? Morris asks, his voice heavy with the horror of this concept. Not trapped, transformed, existing in possibility rather than finality. The entity's form grows more substantial as it continues to focus on the box in my hands. The boat restorer, my creation, calls to me. I feel the pull strengthening, the box growing heavier in my grasp. My mind races, trying to process everything we've learned, everything Elias Winters documented. The lighthouse keeper believed that depriving the entity of all 7 boats had weakened it, forced it into dormancy. If I surrender this last boat, the cycle begins again. More children taken, more lives destroyed. But if I refuse, the entity seems to be growing stronger by the moment, its form more defined, more present in our reality. Would it simply take the boat by force? Or would it find another way to complete its collection, perhaps crafting a replacement for the lost Leviathan? Wait, I say, an idea forming. You say the children formed a bond by accepting your gifts. The boats were the connection, the means by which you could take them across boundaries. Yes, the entity confirms. The bond must be willing. The gift must be accepted. So the boats are important not just as objects, but as symbols of agreement. I continue, my mind racing ahead of my words, as contracts in a sense. Your understanding is limited but not incorrect. I look down at the metal box, then back at the entity. What if I destroy the boat, break the contract? For the first time, the entity's form wavers, a ripple of what might be concern passing through its misty substance. The boat is mine, my creation, but it's been in our world for over a century, I argue. Under our physical laws, and in our world, contracts can be voided, agreements nullified. You do not understand the consequences, the entity warns, its voice taking on a harder edge. The boundaries must be maintained, the crossings must occur. Without the pattern, without the cycle, greater instabilities arise. What kind of instabilities? Morris asks. Tears in the fabric between worlds, uncontrolled passages, entities far less accommodating than I finding their way to your reality. I'm not sure whether to believe this threat or interpret it as an attempt to manipulate us. And we're supposed to accept the sacrifice of children to prevent this? 7 every cycle. A small price for the stability of boundaries that protect billions. The moral calculus is impossible, made more so by the fact that we have only the entity's word about these greater threats. I look to Morris, seeing my own conflict reflected in his expression. There has to be another way, I insist. A different kind of agreement, a different kind of crossing that doesn't involve taking children. The entity is silent for a long moment, its form fluctuating as if in deep consideration. Finally, it speaks again. There are alternatives, but they require equal exchange. Balance must be maintained. What kind of exchange? I ask cautiously. A willing crossing, an adult consciousness, with full understanding, offering passage in place of the 7 children. Morris steps forward before I can respond. I volunteer, he says firmly. Morris, no! I grab his arm, pulling him back. You can't trust its terms. He turns to me, his expression resolute. Eleanor, I've spent my entire adult life studying the history of this town, trying to understand what happened in 1906. If I can prevent it from happening again, if I can save future children from this fate, then my life has meaning. But you don't know what will happen to you, I argue. You heard what it said about transformation, about existing in possibility rather than finality. That could mean anything. It means liberation from the constraints of linear time. The entity interjects. Existence across multiple states simultaneously. Your friend would not be lost, merely expanded beyond the limitations of human perception. That doesn't sound like a fair exchange for 7 children, I say bitterly. The value is not in the number, but in the willing understanding, the entity explains. Children cross easily because they have not yet become fixed in their perception of reality. Adults rarely can, except through extraordinary circumstances or complete surrender of identity. A willing, conscious crossing by one who fully comprehends what they are doing carries tremendous power across the boundaries. Morris looks at me intently. I've lived my life, Eleanor. I'm 73 years old, with no family, few close friends. My work has been my life, and what greater culmination of that work could there be than this? To not just document history, but to actively prevent a tragedy from repeating. I want to argue further, to find some other solution, but the certainty in Morris's eyes stops me. This is his choice, made with full awareness of the stakes and consequences, at least as much as any human can understand them. If I agree to this, Morris says, addressing the entity directly, you must promise that no more children will be taken from this town. No more boats gifted to create bonds. Without the need for the cycle, there would be no purpose in such actions. The entity responds, your crossing would maintain the boundary for the equivalent of many human lifetimes. And the children you've already taken? I ask. What happens to them? They remain as they are. Their crossing cannot be undone without creating instability. It's an imperfect solution, but faced with the alternative of more disappearances, more grief inflicted on families, it seems to be the best option available to us. How would this work? Morris asks. What do I need to do? Hold the boat, the entity instructs. Acknowledge it as the symbol of crossing. When you are ready, step forward into the mist. Morris turns to me one last time. The journals, the photograph, everything we've learned. Make sure it's preserved, but protected. Keep enough information available that if something like this happens again, someone will understand what they're dealing with. I nod, tears beginning to blur my vision. I will, I promise. With steady hands, I open the metal box and remove the toy boat named Leviathan. Its wood gleams with an inner light that seems impossible for an object that has been hidden away from the sun for over a century. I pass it to Morris, who accepts it with solemn reverence. I, Morris Keene, accept this boat as a symbol of crossing, he states clearly, holding the toy vessel in both hands. I offer myself willingly as passage, in exchange for the safety of the children of this town. The entity's form becomes more defined, more present, as if Morris's words are drawing it further into our reality. The mist swirls around us, creating a tunnel-like formation with the entity at its center. Morris gives me one last look, not of fear or regret, but of peace and purpose, then steps forward into the mist, toward the waiting figure. For an instant I see them both clearly, Morris, solid and human, and the entity, a swirling pattern of light and vapor that only approximately resembles a human form. Then they seem to merge, their outlines blurring together, becoming indistinguishable from the mist itself. A sound like a single, perfect musical note resonates through the air, and then, silence. The mist begins to thin, returning to the natural sea fog it had appeared to be when we first arrived. Within minutes, the path ahead is visible again, leading up to where Morris's car waits. I stand alone on the trail, the empty metal box in my hands, uncertain of what I've just witnessed. Was Morris truly gone? Transformed? Or would I find him waiting by the car? The whole experience nothing but a shared hallucination. The climb back to the road seems to take both forever and no time at all. When I reach the turnout where we parked, Morris's car sits empty, the keys placed carefully on the driver's seat as if left deliberately for me to find. Whatever happened on that misty path, Morris Keene, as I knew him, is gone. The drive back to North Haven passes in a daze. I return to the Historical Society, now locked and empty, and use the spare key Morris had shown me to let myself in. In his office, I carefully place the metal box, now empty, on his desk alongside a written account of everything that transpired. The photograph of Thomas Caldwell, the image that started this journey, I return to its protective sleeve, uncertain whether it should be preserved as evidence or hidden away to prevent others from being drawn into this same situation. In the end, I decide to take it with me, to keep it safe until I can determine the best course of action. Before leaving North Haven, I stop by the Harborview Inn to settle my bill and collect my belongings. Sarah seems to sense something is wrong, but doesn't press me for details when I explain that Morris had to leave unexpectedly and I'll be returning home today. You found what you were looking for? She asks simply. Yes, I tell her, though I'm not sure I fully understand what I found. She nods as if this is a common outcome of inquiries into Blackwater Harbor's history. Morris has always said that some questions lead to bigger questions rather than answers. He's right about that, I say, feeling the weight of Morris's absence like a physical pressure in my chest. As I drive away from North Haven, the photograph safely tucked in my bag, I wonder who sent it to me in the first place. Was it Morris himself, somehow knowing what would unfold? Or some other player in this strange drama that I haven't yet identified? And what of the entity, the boatmaker? Was its story about maintaining boundaries between worlds true, or merely a manipulation to achieve its own ends? Will Morris's sacrifice truly prevent future disappearances, or have I been complicit in something I don't fully comprehend? These questions may never have definitive answers. Like the restoration work I perform on old photographs, some aspects remain unclear, some details lost to time. What matters is what has been preserved, what has been revealed. 2 weeks after returning home, I receive a small package in the mail. There's no return address, just like the one that contained Thomas Caldwell's photograph. Inside is a small, exquisitely carved wooden boat, not identical to the Leviathan but similar in craftsmanship. There's no name painted on its hull, no markings on its underside, just a simple note that reads, "The boundaries hold. The cycle is altered. Remember." I place this new boat on my desk beside the photograph of Thomas Caldwell, the two artifacts of an impossible story serving as reminders of boundaries crossed and promises kept. In the right light, when evening shadows lengthen across my studio, I sometimes think I can see additional feet in the photograph now, not just the ones behind Thomas, but another pair, adult-sized and familiar, standing protectively beside the boy. And occasionally, when the fog rolls in from the bay near my home, I hear what sounds like a child's laughter mingled with an old man's wise chuckle, carried on a breeze that doesn't seem to touch anything else around it. The boundaries between worlds may be more permeable than we imagine. The lines between past and present, between reality and possibility, between what we see and what we choose to ignore. All these are matters of perception, of willingness to acknowledge what exists beyond our understanding. As I continue my work restoring old photographs, revealing what time and circumstance have obscured, I keep a special awareness for those images that might contain more than initially meets the eye, for feet that shouldn't be there, for eyes that seem to look beyond the moment being captured, for children holding toys that seem too perfect to be made by human hands. The photograph sits on my desk, its edges frayed and yellowed by the passage of time, a sepia-toned window to another era, a reminder that restoration sometimes reveals truths we aren't prepared to face. And sometimes, just sometimes, it offers us the chance to make things right.